Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this live stream. I'm delighted today to be with Muaawiyah Tucker. Muawiya is somebody who I want to introduce very briefly. He is a Medina University graduate, which is in Saudi Arabia, which is the city of the Prophet, peace be upon him. That's where he is buried, Medina. And he's also somebody involved in crypto. Jazakallah khair for joining us, Muawiya. Tell us a little bit about your crypto stuff, because that's what you're mainly known for.
Alaikum salam, so thanks for having me, alhamdulillah. Well, just a little correction. They're not crypto, Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. Okay, yes. Yeah, you did correct that with me a few days ago, actually, or a week ago or so.
Alhamdulillah.
So yeah, what do you do? What's your thing?
So essentially, primarily, I'm an educator. That's my primary what I do, and I teach stuff. I do some kind of development work, website development and whatnot, developing some APIs related to kind of transactions using Bitcoin and that kind of stuff. And like I said, mainly to do with education. So teaching Arabic, Islamic studies, and also writing books. I'm in the process of writing some books and stuff like that. So I'm doing different things, but I could say surrounding the Islamic ethos and different things you can do as a Muslim, basically.
All right, brilliant. So you yourself, you converted to Islam, right? So
Yes.
could you tell us a little bit about what was your faith like before? What household did you come from?
Yeah. So that's an interesting question because in looking back at the time when I was before I became Muslim, um, my household was, I would say, Christian, but um I know it's hard to define it because it's not like we wasn't it's not like we were heathenistic and not really practicing Christianity, but it wasn't like we were also practicing it as well. It was a funny one. So for an example, my mum sent me to a private school. It was a Seventh Day Adventist private school, so it's a Christian ethos private school, and it was an all black school. That was the idea was my mom didn't want me to go through racism in education, so what gave me to give me an environment which was conducive to learning education. So being in that environment, we were exposed to Christianity quite heavily. So we used to have assembly practically every morning where we would have like half an hour of service, talk about they'll have maw'idah, they'll have reminders about God and Christ and sing and bash the tambourines and whatnot. That was almost a morning thing from probably about half nine to about half nine. So that was a daily thing, and there was even a time when I decided to start attending church every Saturday because Seventh Day Adventist Christians, the idea with them is that Jesus never came to replace the law; he came to fulfill the law. That's what they say. So most of the laws, well, let me correct that. They they wish that they followed most of the laws of Judaism. In practice, they don't. But they do practice the obvious things like having a Sabbath on a Saturday, not eating pork, and the rest of it. So they have resemblance of trying to follow the law of Moses. But if you actually look at it in practice, they have their shortcomings as well. But in terms of the law, they are in essence closer to what Jesus apparently followed in their view. So I even attended church of my own accord for a period of time when I was in secondary school. So it wasn't something my mom encouraged me to do. It was something I just felt it was a good thing to do. So I can't exactly think of why I did that because I think I was about 13 or even 12 at the time. I can't exactly remember my motivations, but it was generally an idea of wanting to be more closer to God and whatnot. So there's always that belief in me. Also, because my mum remarried, my stepdad, we used to always talk about Christ and talk about God, often to like early hours in the morning. And ironically, some of the ideas that I would say even led me to Islam in a way came from those discussions. So discussions of just opening the Bible and reading it, he was very adamant that Christians should follow the text, they should follow the revelation. And it was very known in our discussions that people they would say things that aren't true. And they'll claim it's in the Bible, but it's not in the Bible. So that ethos of verifying, that ethos of sticking to the text and being adamant and staunch upon the actual sayings of Jesus and whatnot. That was there. But ironically, that's the thing about I find about Christianity is that, or I'm sure you in your line of work, you probably come across many Christians. Every single denomination, whether it be Catholics, Seventh-day Adventists, Protestants, whatever the case may be, every denomination, they always seem to get some things very right and the rest very wrong. So it's almost like you can find the truth. If you used to cherry pick those things that are right, you probably could almost get the holistic message of Islam from all of them as a whole, but not one of them encompasses all of them. If that makes sense. It's a weird one.
Yeah.
So in terms of that issue of that issue of following the text, I definitely picked that up from that, and that was something that was always in me, and that became very important when I got to college, which will come a bit later on. So yeah, that was me, and I think also at that time, growing up as well, that kind of kept me out of a lot of heathenistic practices like drinking alcohol and drinking and smoking, that kind of stuff. I was never really into that stuff, partly because I was never really. It never made sense to me. Why would you ingest something to enjoy yourself? Either it's fun or it's not fun. Why do you need to ingest something? But also the idea of trying to be some level of good and following and righteousness. So I would say I was more Christian than the general Christian, but not good enough in hindsight. It's a funny one. So that was kind of my background, Seventh-day Adventist. But funnily enough, my mum's not Seventh-day Adventist. My stepdad's not Seventh-day Adventist. My auntie, who passed away recently, unfortunately, she died Seventh-day Adventist. So it was in our family, but wasn't that big a move, if that makes sense. So that was kind of my asal, or my origins, my beginnings, my humble beginnings. That was that.
So you made an important point. You were saying that why ingest yourself with something to make yourself happy? The reason why I find that interesting is because I can think of other reverts that I know who before becoming Muslim, they were also thinking along the same line. So, one person, Hamza comes to mind. Hamza Sotsis, he didn't really used to drink as a non-Muslim.
Yeah.
Likewise, Salahuddin Patel, somebody from
Yeah.
a Hindu background, again, he didn't like this idea of drinking.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
something like, do you think, Muawiyah, it's to do with you don't want to go down the slippery slope of escapism? You rather deal with reality. Was there something along that line with you?
I don't think it was that deep, to be
Okay.
honest. And the reason I say that is because, generally speaking, I wasn't really into it because my circles weren't like that. So my circle of friends weren't really into the drinking and the partying and that kind of stuff. I was never really in that clique. And there was a time in my secondary years I wanted to be with that kind of crew, but alhamdulillah they rejected me as a companion. I was too much of a nerd to be in that crew, and that was a good thing. It turned out to be a good thing. Now obviously all boys want to be in with the in crowd, but I was technically more nerdy to be in with the in crowd, and that was a blessing in disguise. But there was a time though, I think on my 14th birthday party, that friends came around. Me and my friends in our bedroom. My mum and her friends were in downstairs and whatnot. So all my friends left. My mum was obviously with her friends, and it was just me and one of my friends in the bedroom, and we was in there, and I was playing with my Super Nintendo, and we had some stupid idea. Let's go and sneak some alcohol from downstairs. So we did, and literally like it was, I don't know, some of the strong whiskey or whatever not. So literally out of a cup, probably like 90% of the cup was whiskey. We just put a little bit of cherry in it, thinking, yeah, let's just try this. So I drank it, and it was the shift from sober to drunk was so rapid. It was literally like bang. I was like dizzy, couldn't see what was going on, and then my friend, he was laughing his head off, laughing, and then eventually just stopped laughing. I said, "What? Are you dead or something?" Like laughing at him. The thing is, he just died. But no, he just fell asleep. He literally was like that. That's how much alcohol we ingested. So then I thought, okay, let me go to sleep. I went to sleep. I woke up, vomited everywhere, went back to sleep. It was so horrific that I think for 2 days after that, I was like, I had symptoms of being drunk like 2 days straight. So I said to myself, why would I do that to myself? Like, it was such a bizarre thing to do. I did it as a joke, thought it was funny at the time, but the ramification was just so horrific. I was vomiting everywhere. I was dizzy. I thought to myself, why do I want to do that to myself? So I decided at that point, never again. So it was kind of like, you know, that you had the head of stories with parents taking their kids and giving them a whole packet of cigarettes to smoke so much that they get sick of it, never do it again. That kind of happened indirectly with that event. So generally, I wasn't really into the alcohol. After that event, I was like, nah, never doing that again. And that was when I was like 14. So from that, and when I became Muslim about 17, 18, it was like a few odd years. I said to myself, nah, that's just not me. So my approach was more a rational approach. If I drink alcohol or smoke or whatnot, it has to be for a benefit, and I see no benefit. And I took that approach to the extreme. Like, I remember my stepdad, one time he tried to give up coffee, and he had like shaking and like withdrawal symptoms. And I saw that, I thought, I'm not touching that stuff ever. So I don't drink coffee, because from that I thought, it's the same thing as any old drug, and I don't want to be in that world. I want to be out of that world. So it's a principled thing. I don't know. It wasn't like a religious thing. It was a principled thing, I think.
I understand that, and as someone who loves coffee, I just drank it live stream. There's some level of pattern that I'm looking at when it comes to, because we deal with a lot of converts. So your line of thinking was quite independent, right? So when it comes to, I'm not going to do anything if it doesn't lead to if it doesn't benefit me in some way. It doesn't matter whether it gives me pleasure. I'm not going to do something if it's going to I'm going to get addicted to it. I'm going to have to start depending on it. And then having an interest yourself in religion. So all of these are traits which are kind of show character, which shows a level of independence. The reason why I'm highlighting this is because I do think we can pinpoint a lot of conversions to Islam due to people's ability to break out from society, not accept the social norm. How much of that do you think played a role in you looking into Islam?
100%.
Okay.
And I say that because I've always had a character of being different. Always. I mean, it's almost make it a joke, me and my wife, that if everyone goes left, I always tend to go right, just for the sake of it. I'm always the one who's taking a different approach to things. Yeah. And sometimes I say it as a joke, but if I look back in the past, I find that is almost a consistent pattern. Meaning that if I see everyone going in one direction, I'm always wondering, okay, but why? Why not the other direction? I'm always exploring the opposite view and seeing why things are as in, I don't like following the crowd. That's kind of thing. I don't like following the crowd. And if I see people following the crowd even more, I even more resist following the crowd. I don't like the idea of taqleed, or of blind following, you could say. And that's always been a view with me. So that's kind of why I would say initially I broke from the general Christian doctrine about Jesus being God before Islam for years. Again, when I used to have those discussions with my stepdad, those are one of the things that when we read in the Bible, we saw Jesus praying to God. So it made sense that how could you pray to yourself? So it wasn't a case of, well, this is what the narrative is, we accepted it. For me, it was like, this is the narrative is, but how can you accept it? It doesn't make sense. I've always been that I'll say uber rational. I'm always trying to rationalize things and see things. If it doesn't make sense to me, I don't just accept it. I don't just accept things. So the idea that Jesus was God, my rationale at the time was Jesus isn't God, but he's the Son of God. So that was what my view gone.
Could I stop you there? So I understand the line of thinking you're going down, but I think I want to come back to that later. What led you to not believing Jesus is God? I'm trying to understand first your characteristics, and then we'll get into your actual conversion story. So there's obviously the independent way of thinking, rather, and then there's breaking out of the what society's telling you. So that's another element of it. Another question I have for you, and this is everything before your conversion, right? A lot of people your age 14, 15, with that age that you started thinking about these questions, they're into girls and partying and, all those sorts of things. What made you in your early 20s and late teens think about these bigger questions rather than doing what everybody's doing? Because let's not beat around the bush. It's very inviting, it's very tempting, it's very seductive, it's very powerful. It takes you in a direction, like everybody's going in this vortex, but you're swimming against the grain. Why? Like, what led to that?
Again, there's no isolated incident I can say that in this way I behave one way and another way I behave differently. Almost every decision I make, I would say there is that character trait of independence. So as an example, all my friends were into having girlfriends and when I say girlfriends, I mean multiple girlfriends, one night stands, all that kind of stuff. For me, that all sounded irrational. I mean, why would you want to always be one girl and another girl and another girl? It's a constant hunt. I mean, I can understand this, it might be enjoyable, but for me, I always wanted to, from a very young age, before even puberty, I wanted to get married and have children, not have multiple girls, one after the other, one come and the next one come and the next one come. I've always been against that idea. And like I said, I did try to be with the in crowd, but I was always just too nerdy for that. So there was always that ongoing friction between those of my friends. So when I left secondary school, I went to college, I made a total break from all my friends in that regard. So when they were all still doing their partying and girls and whatnot, I just said, look, I'm not interested in any of that stuff. I'm going to college. I broke from that trend. Even funny enough, in my area, there were two main colleges. One college where most of my friends are going to, and another one where hardly any of them were going to. And I chose to go to that one because I didn't want to be. I no longer wanted to be in that crowd of what I felt was destructive behavior. And let me give an example of how destructive. I mean, just an example. So after I went to college, probably about after a year, I met up with one of my friends who was in the other college, and asked him how things are going. And he mentioned that he just did a bank thing. I'm like, what do you mean a bank thing? So he knows a friend. He's behind the counter. He goes to the bank. He puts the money in the account. Then he draws out the money in the account, and that's how they kind of make some money. And I'm like, okay, that sounds a bit weird. I mean, for me, it was a new thing. So what did you do with that money? I'm thinking, what did you invest? Did you make some business? Oh no, I bought some Moschino trousers and I bought some records. I'm like, that's just such a dumb thing to do. You just got money in your hand, and just blown it on clothes and records. So that kind of reinforced the idea that what I did was the best thing to do because those guys are not heading in the right direction, and I'm heading in a completely different direction. So when it came to girls, when it came to the partying, when it came to socializing, I was literally in the other direction. Was it due to upbringing? I guess so. Was it due to the religious doctrine? I would definitely say I was influenced by that because from those meetings or from those discussions I had with my stepdad, one of the things that we both respected highly was modesty amongst women. Even used to praise Muslim women for wearing hijab, saying that they act more like Mary than women of today, not realizing anything about Islam. It's just something we made. It's just an observation. We didn't even think about Islam. It's just an observation. So there's always this kind of break from the norm. I can't explain one single event which led to that, but just generally as a character as a whole, there was that general overall break from that general narrative. And then when I got to college, and when I was presented with Islam, I wasn't looking for it. I was literally sitting in my maths class, and the teacher hadn't come in that day. So I'm just there trying to do my studies. Everyone around me is like dusting around, chatting, socializing. I'm like, let me just get on my studies. I want to get somewhere in life. And one guy came in front of me, plunked his chair in front of me, and said to me, "What do you know about Islam?" That was it. Just I don't know who the guy was. I never met the guy before. He's in the back of the class. I always thought it was just a dosser, waste of time, waste of space. He just came in front of me and said, "What do you know about Islam?" So because I saw him as like a dosser, like a time waster, I'll engage with him, see what he has to say, and I'll refute him. That's why that was my position, and it didn't go that way. He showed that I knew nothing, and what he presented to me seemed more in line with what I believed, and that shocked me because I assumed he was Pakistani, and I assumed that all Asians were monkey worshippers. and cow worshippers. That was my view, and that's how most Christians see Muslims. They see Asians. They think of India. They think of idolatry. They're all the same.
Yeah.
So when he said, "Oh, we believe in Moses and Abraham, whatnot," I was confused. How can you believe in Moses and worship a cow? You know, at that time I was still saying that's just so dumb. How can you do this? How can you do that? And then when I scratched the surface and I realized, well, that's not the case. Then I was like, okay, but who are these guys then? And then I went down the rabbit hole of research. And so that was primarily it. Really, it wasn't like I was receive ongoing da'wah. I was just challenged about Islam. He opened the door about Islam, and because I generally have an obsessive personality, I thought I have to know everything about Islam. And my mum had invested at the time in the Encyclopedia World Book. I don't know if you heard of World Book. It was in Britannica. I had the World Book version. So there's two main encyclopedias at the time. There was World Book and there was Britannica. I had the World Book version. So everything I found, I went to Islam, read everything there. Footnotes, it had Sunnah. What's Sunnah? What's Quran? What's Muhammad? What's this? And basically, I went down the rabbit hole, just reading. It was my Google at the time. So I just literally absorbed everything about that. And from then, it was like, okay, what's Christianity? Everything about that. What's the Bible? Who wrote the Bible? What this? And then after about a couple of months, I was pretty much convinced. I mean, I hadn't made a step yet. I had accepted Islam openly, but when I say I was convinced, it got to the stage that I was even given da'wah to Islam months before I took Shahada. I mean, it was. I know it sounds silly, but I was telling people there's a book from God. You know, it's verified. It's uncorrupted and whatnot. And then sometimes they'll even say to me, "So why are you not Muslim then?" I'm like, "Oh, I'll get there."
You know, it's interesting you say that because that's exactly what Sheikh Green was explaining, that when he was non-Muslim, he was at a party. Actually, no, he was a newly practicing Muslim or non-Muslim, literally just early time, right? And he was drunk or he's drinking and he's just talking to people about how fantastic Islam is.
Yeah.
I met a guy who became Muslim and he was working in central London in one of these really expensive bars. You know, you get the guy, I don't know what his name is, who makes the shakes.
Yeah. The bartender, whatever.
The bartender, whatever. But these are like specialists. They're like shake it and put a flag in and all that.
Yeah.
They earn thousands, right? His manager was Moroccan and he was giving him dawah in that setting. And in your case, it was the sixth form. Everyone's messing around. Some guy comes, what do you know about Islam? You're giving dawah in that scenario. So I think that's a lesson to learn. Dawah meaning propagation to Islam. That's a lesson that no matter where you are in life, if you know something's true, you should be able to articulate it, right?
Yeah.
Should be able to speak about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been a person that I've always I'm generally a da'i for all things. I'm sure you know already from you see me how I behave with Bitcoin. I'm always, if I see something is correct, I'm very vocal about it, wherever it is. If it could be Islam, it could be Bitcoin, it could be my hatred for banks, whatever it is, I'm always very vocal about that. So when I come towards something and to me it makes sense, number one, I love to give, and number two, I love to be challenged. So those two things kind of go hand in hand. I love having that engagement with others where people, you know, they challenge what I have to say and I have to find answers for that. I love that kind of give and take. But also love to I mean, at the end of the day, I guess it's a character thing. If you have something that's good, you love others to have good things as well. You know, if you found a well of gold and there's so much you can have, you like, so come on guys, you know, there's a well of gold. I mean, that's usually my perception. You kind of see that in if you look at my Twitter feed. If I see something on Twitter that looks good, immediately I press retweet, because why not? If it's good for me, it should be good for everyone. So that's kind of how my position was. So so like I said, I was reading about Islam, I was learning about Islam. I found that it answered pretty much all of the questions I had about life. So you can imagine my questions. Why do Christians say Jesus is God when clearly from what I read he's not God?
Yeah.
How do I understand this idea of Son of God and God? I had lots of questions, and when I came to Islam, it was like literally, okay, well, there's the answer. But again, my long-standing methodology or behavior was verification. So early on, after speaking to that brother Salman, big shout to Salman if he ever sees this again. Jazakallah khair for changing my life. So after speaking with Salman, one of the things I decided to do after reading about, I was absorbing all I could about what Islam was. I thought to myself, okay, this is what people are claiming. I need to see this myself.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the Bible is true in my view at the time. My Bible is true. We have the Old Testament, we have the New Testament, and now I had this thing called the Quran. So my view was, okay, the Muslims say that there's no such thing as Trinity, and I've been taught that there is a Trinity. So there's an easy solution I have in my head. It was in my head that I had an easy solution. Let me read the Bible and let me read the Quran myself. And if I find that in the Old Testament there is Trinity, then in my head there's continuity. As in what was there at the beginning is still there at Jesus. So therefore the ones who changed things were the Muslims.
Yeah.
And therefore I don't want the change. I want the origin. I want the beginning. But if in the Old Testament there is monotheism, no Trinity, and the New Testament there is a Trinity, and the Quran has the same as the Old Testament, then something went wrong in the middle.
Yeah.
And therefore I know who was wrong. Because I can't become a Jew, because you can't become a Jew. That's known. Whether they want to admit it or not, you can't become a Jew. So it's either Christianity or Islam.
Yeah.
So I read Genesis, I read Exodus, I read Leviticus, I got to Numbers. I didn't realize that Numbers is primarily about tribes, so there's like lots of names and numbers, and like hence why it's called Numbers. I'm like, this is getting tiresome now. I'm just reading about tribes and another tribe. It wasn't fulfilling my question. So I got a bit impatient. I thought, I could be reading this whole Bible, and before I get to the Quran, I might even just die. Let me just read something of the Quran, just something, just to wet the paddock. The anticipation is there. I'm trying to get to the point.
Yeah.
So let me just open the Quran, because I had a copy, and I thought, let me just read something. I'm not sure if I searched index for Jesus or I just opened the book randomly, but the first ayah I came to was Allah saying, "O people of the book, do not say about me that which is not true. Do not say three, for I am one." And that was like the largest smacks in the face I've probably ever had in my life, because it was, number one, if you've ever read the Bible, the mode of speech, how it's laid out, how it's presented, is completely different from the Quran.
Yeah.
So where I try to draw the parallel for Muslims who haven't come across, read the Bible, I'll say it's not like reading Seerah, right? Reading the biography of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's a story. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. It's a narrative. But the Quran is directly the speech of Allah. Allah speaking to you. It's completely different.
Yep.
And because what I've read was actually Allah saying, "Don't say this about me, because I am." It literally, I would say that was the point Iman entered to my heart, and I felt it. The shake, the shivers I had in my bones, the way I just felt my hands shaking, it was undeniable at the time. I still had in my head, I had to still verify, but what I read was undeniable. This is literally the answer in an unambiguous terms. And for those who are Christian, especially when you start learning about Islam, when you start learning what ambiguity really means when it comes to belief, Christian belief is ambiguous at best. Whereas Islamic belief is clear cut. It's literally as clear as day. So when I saw that, I thought to myself, wow, that's quite conclusive. And from then on, it was pretty much, I would say easy sailing in terms of the belief section.
Yeah.
As for the actual action section, me actually making the step of taking the Shahada or becoming Muslim, I would say it kind of is an example of human nature. So and I see this with a lot of people when it comes to belief systems. It's not to do with Islam per se, it's to do with belief systems. If a person has existed or lives in a certain paradigm, a certain behavior, to shift that, the ramifications of that is so huge that often people won't make that shift. Although they know, as in the mental shift is already made, but the physical shift sometimes delays, sometimes can even prevent you from making the actual physical shift. Sometimes a person may make the mental shift, but due to the delay in that physical shift, then they have this dissonance now. They have cognitive dissonance. The mind is indifferent between the action. So some people come to the stage where they say, okay, I need to change my ways and they become Muslim. But some actually don't and they shift backwards. And that happened to me in college. So I had a friend of mine who was in college. I came to Islam. I told him the good news, sat down with him till early hours in the morning. He fully believed. So I showed him the evidence. He saw it straight away. But for him, his shift was, but I have this in my life. I have a girlfriend. I want to do this. I want to do that. What I'll do is I'll wait until X time. And that delay led him not to make the step. And to this day, if I was now, he's still not made our step. Because like I said, when you making the physical shift, sometimes people think that if you believe, then you act. That's not the case. Many people believe, but they don't act. Abu Talib, the uncle of the Messenger of Allah, believed, but didn't make the step. He even said on his deathbed, there's no religion better than the religion of Muhammad. But even the religion of his forefathers is too big a step. And unfortunately, some people, that is more important to them than action. And I would like to bring this point back to what you asked earlier on about character. Because I have a character of being different.
Yeah.
Making that shift was easy for me because the truth is manifest. Being different is not something new to me. I don't mind being the odd one out, so I'll make the step. But those who are not contrarian, for them it's like, okay, but what's my mom gonna say? What's my dad gonna say? What's my family gonna say? For them, it's not about truth. It's about what they say in Arabic, sum'a, or what other people say. So everyone has different challenges, but for me, my challenge wasn't what other people say. I mean, to this day, I don't mind. I'll be the only guy in the room, and I'll be all right. I'm cool with that. So eventually, what happened was, again, back to the issue of da'wah. Did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you that trait that you pointed out of being on the truth, but on your own, you rather be against everybody than follow the sort of follow the crowd. Was that based upon the fact that the Seventh Day Adventist methodology actually teaches you to be very confident? Like I've seen those types of churches. I've seen, in fact, in Brixton, we had a dawah stall, and we had some of the Pentecostal guys come out, and they were so loud and so confident. And Catholics and others, you find them as very meek and mild. So, do you think it was part of the church upbringing that made you independent?
No, I think it was mainly because for the first 10 years of my life, or 9 years of my life, I was an only child. So I've always been an independent. No, I'm serious. I've been an only child. Generally speaking, as people may think I am an extrovert, but I'm very much an introvert. So I'm always
No way. That's not
100%. So I'm a
very strange
introverted.
introvert.
I'm an introverted extrovert, or was it other way around? I'm not sure, but I can act like an extrovert, but I'm very much an introvert. So I'm comfortable doing my own thing. So maybe that actually led me to look for the Seventh-day Adventist way, or this way, or to go in that way. But my point is that I've always been happy not being with the crowd. By the way, I'm not saying that I choose controversy just for the sake of controversy. But what I'm saying is that if I see the truth in one direction and I see everyone else on another direction, the number game doesn't matter to me. I don't care. I mean, you can have everyone in the classroom doing one direction. I'll be like, okay, but I still see that as being different. And that often gets me in trouble, by the way. Many examples in my life where I've rubbed people up the wrong way because I'm very vocal. If I say something different, I'll say no, I don't see it that way. But that's another story to go. But yeah, so again, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I look at my wife, for example, she's part of many siblings, there's like 7 of them, and she's very different to me. She's very extroverted, and I see maybe that's the reason. Maybe because I was the only child at one point, so I'm kind of happy doing my own thing. I don't know. I do wonder if introversy or extroversy is a learnt trait or it's a born trait, because I know, for example, Japanese culture is very introverted.
That's a good point. I've been to Japan. I've seen it.
Yes, how can a culture be introverted? I mean, you can't say it's genetic, or maybe you could say genetic. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it's a learned thing or what, but that's just me.
Yeah. I mean, there's nature nurture discussions, but there's definitely an interplay. I think what's going on is that people's upbringing has a bigger impact than decisions they make. So, for example, someone who's an introvert says, all right, I'm going to go to a course of Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar and I'm going to become an extrovert. Like, it doesn't really work. Like, you're set in your ways by the time you're around 20, right? You've got certain dispositions. Okay, so alhamdulillah, we have there's quite a few things that you could put together and say, okay, so these are the ingredients that you need in order to really arrive at truth. One of the things I found interesting, and I didn't comment on this before, I think his name was Salman, the guy who came to you, put the chair in front of you and said, what do you know about Islam, right? You switched from, I'm going to refute this guy, to, wait a minute, this is making sense. That's very difficult for people to do, especially if they've already decided they want to refute somebody, or they're upon a certain belief, or their beliefs are being shown to be wrong, or they're talking to someone, in your case, who you considered at the time for him to be like a waste man, or I don't know what term you used, a layman or whatever, somebody that's just messing around. And people don't like to hear something, even if it's true, from someone that they feel is not as intelligent as them. So where did that come from? Because that's actually quite unique. A lot of people would not actually do what you did in that situation.
There is, I mean, from a very young age, I've always been a type of person that if something I don't know, I want to know. I'm always trying to learn something new. I mean, literally, there was actually one person made a comment about that, which actually kind of worried me a bit. But anyway, so generally speaking, anything which is new, I want to absorb it and consume it. So even if it's against me, fine. The fact is, I still want to absorb information and take as much information as possible. So for me, maybe it was a case of, well, he's bringing this stuff about Islam, and maybe I didn't see it as a threat because it was still new information. I wanted to learn it. So from that aspect, it's what I want rather than what I shy away from. But I do know that there are some people who are the complete opposite. Unfortunately, like I have family members who I try to talk to them about Islam, for example. For them, anything which differs from their view is like kryptonite. Just the suggestion that something is different from their view, they don't want to hear it. For me, it's the opposite. If something's different, I want to hear it. I want to hear what's different, because maybe what I have is maybe what I have is wrong. Maybe what you have is right. So I want to assess that. And I do know, I have noticed, I have to say, make a point that actually from one of your courses, actually from when I attended the IERA week thing, one of the things that you guys highlighted, which I really 100% believe, 100% believe, when you, and I'm grateful that you guys raised that issue for me, because I never saw it the way you guys presented it, was everyone has a different piece to their puzzle. Some people are moved emotionally. Some people are moved through events in their life. For me, it's about logic. I'm not moved by emotions. Emotional things doesn't mean much to me. I'm actually, sometimes I find myself unfortunately a bit cold in that regard. So I have to wonder to myself, am I something wrong with me? Sometimes I don't care if something upsets people or would cause argument. The fact is, truth is truth.
Yeah.
And I've always taken this very staunch approach that truth is truth, and truth is manifest. And if you just look at it, you should see it. That's
Yeah.
always been my stance, and that's kind of why, especially when I was in college, they used to get me into trouble a lot, because when I would speak to people who are on a different mindset, for them truth doesn't matter as much. For them,
Yeah.
feelings mean a lot more to them, and I'm like, who cares about your feelings? I don't care what you feel. Facts are facts. So from that aspect, when he came to me with Islam and he brought to me logical arguments, the logic trumped all feelings I probably may have had, and that's definitely a character thing for me. Um, and even things like I say that what come to me, if I see that there is a credence or an avenue of truth in that, I have to investigate. I have to. There was I remember when I was in college, just slightly after college, obviously, when you're new Muslim now, there's that hamas, there's that desire to teach Islam to every person you come across in the street. I remember coming across a Shia. I knew a lot about the Shia from before, or those who follow the Shia sect. I knew about this from before, from what I read about Islam. That's why I chose the name Muaawiyah. I chose the name Muaawiyah so that when I speak to a Muslim and I tell him my name, I could decide and see from his reaction who he is. That was one of my reasons why I chose the name Muaawiyah. And I remember speaking to a Shia, and he told me some stuff I didn't know about, which intrigued me. I said, okay, where did I come from? Immediately I went home. I went to an Islamic bookshop, and I found books about the Shia. I learned about them. Just for the fact that he brought to me something I didn't know about, I have to know about this. So I've never been a person that, is against me. It's against my narrative. I don't want to hear about it or have to refute it. No, I refute it if it's wrong, but only if I can see it's wrong. If I can't see it's wrong, then I don't like to have that stuff. So it's definitely a character trait. I definitely there was a lot of character to play in that regard. So definitely my approach to or how I became Muslim wouldn't necessarily work for everyone. From
Yeah.
as you know as well. But one thing I wanted to draw again back to the issue of what gone.
Yeah, so just hold your thought there, because you made a point, and I really want to reiterate this. Some people are moved by emotion, some people are moved by logic, some people are moved by experiences, some people are moved by human to human, just general interaction. They like values, right? They like certain values. They're like, these values are fantastic. For other people, it's got to do with how Islam gives them a structure. So it's not even to do with logic. It's just like, I just need a direction and this is making sense to me, this kind of thing. What would your advice be to somebody that's searching and they clearly are moved by the logic, but they're not like you, who are like, okay, logic X plus, one is, B or whatever. I'm just going to follow this formula. They're more like, okay, I understand Islam is true. I understand I have to change my life. But like your friend that you mentioned earlier, they're like, not yet. I still want to be with my girlfriend. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to live that lifestyle. It's too difficult. I can't be perfect. What would your advice be when your rational cognitive architecture is in gear and is saying Islam is the truth, but your heart is telling you that, oh, I still love her and I can't give her up and I like alcohol? And how do you advise people?
I mean, I'll be honest. I don't have one advice, and what I always do is I engage with the person to see what exactly they need to hear, because there isn't one thing. So let me give you an example. You're gonna love this story. You're gonna love this story. One, I got in our Islamic Institute. I got a call from someone. They said they want to come in to talk about Islam. I said, come. So they came. So there's a lady who came with her younger sister. So she's probably in her mid-20s, and she brought her younger sister who's in 13 years old or 14 years old. And she said, I want my sister to become Muslim, and I want you to help me, tell her about Islam, teach her about Islam so she can become Muslim. So I said, I said, are you Muslim as well? And she said, no. So immediately I'm like, okay, you want her to become Muslim, but you don't want to be Muslim? And this is an example of what I'm talking about. So she saw that there was value in Islam, and she wanted that value for others, but for herself, she had some hang-ups. So I tried to address her because I was like, I want to talk about what issues you have, because that's more pressing. I mean, why would you advise your younger sister to adopt a whole religion, but you yourself, you're standoffish and you have some reservations yourself? That sounds a bit counterintuitive. It's almost like, I mean, it's actually the opposite. Normally, you want what's better for others, and you don't mind having what is less for yourself. Not the opposite. We want to throw your siblings into some wacky religion, and then you want to take the higher approach. So, in that perspective, I had to ask her what was her concerns, what was her apprehension, and she had the issue of, well, she sees evolution and she can't see how you can reconcile it. So basically, she had some internal doubts and internal isms,
Yeah.
and also the issue of the hijab and covering and can I do that? So she had internal conflicts. That's the best way to say. She had internal conflicts which held her back, and from that I was able to give her advice. And alhamdulillah, she accepted Islam in the end, and she eventually married a Muslim guy and she got kids now. So alhamdulillah, it worked out. But her case was very different. I wouldn't find another person taking the same approach like for any other person. So as for an advice, a generic advice, I mean, I would say generally to learn, educate yourself. But I've seen the experience that knowledge isn't even a solution for most people. Some people, they know more than me, but they're still not Muslim. Yeah. So it's a hard one, really. I don't know. I do know though, based on what I'm going to say in a minute, that there is for everyone, including you, brother, born in a Muslim family. And I say it's all Muslims, whether you're born in a Muslim family or not, every single person has a point in their life where they choose.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you set the madras when you were young, you memorized the Quran. Some point in your life, you came to a head where you made a decision to go down the route of Islam. Mm-hmm. And that's why I believe that when a person dies upon Islam and they're raised upon as an Islam Muslim and they go to Jannah, you can never be claimed, oh, because I was born in a family. No. You were born in a family, but you still chose. You still made that decision to choose. So with me, I read about Islam. I read parts of the Quran that made me technically, mentally, logically convinced. Even, I would say, emotionally, at some level, convinced. But I still wasn't Muslim. Up until a particular event. So what happened was, in college, after the first year, in my college, there was like this event where you could, I think more colleges generally they might have it, but where they send certain students for like a week in Cambridge or in Oxford, so you can see how it is it's almost like a week workshop in Oxford. You get to see different colleges and speak to different students in that environment. So I attended both the Oxford and the Cambridge one, and in both of them, what was I doing? Da'wah. Throughout the whole event, I was Islam, Quran. Every time we were talking about Islam religion, there was me in the forefront, waving the flag of Islam, blah, 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 Islam, that. And alhamdulillah, for my limited knowledge and at the time, I thought I did pretty well. I was holding the fort. I was delivering the message of Islam. But one day, when we had lunch, I got my dinner on my tray, or my lunch on my tray, and I was walking to the table to eat the food, and there was one guy there, and I'm gonna mention his name because again, Salman was the one who opened the door, but Zishan was the one who pushed me into it. This was one guy he not once did he engage with the conversation, not once did he invite anyone to Islam. He was just a Muslim guy who said nothing about anything to do with Islam. And I'm like, okay, whatever. If you don't want to help, you don't want to help. But when I was walking that direction, Zishan was walking in the other direction. He looked at my plate and said to me, "You hypocrite! You talk about Islam, and your plate is pork." Though that statement was the second slap in my face. Because what he highlighted was the reality was I was calling people to something that I wasn't living myself. And it was highlighting the hypocrisy of it all. That not only am I calling others to something, I'm actually openly acting in opposition to it. And that put me into depression for about a week. even my mum was like, saying, "What's wrong with you, man? You know, you've come back and you're like all quiet, you're not saying anything." So for a
Yeah.
week, I was like, I had to reconcile this. I had to resolve this in my head. And by the
Do
end of that
you?
week, I walked to a mosque, and then I eventually tried to speak to them about it. And the Imam, he opened the Quran and said, he read to me a verse of the Quran about Isa. I said to him, "Yeah, I know that already. I know all of that." He was like, he expected me to not know anything. And I said, "Yeah, I know. Literally, all that you're telling me, I know already. I'm actually quoting that to others."
Yeah.
And then he was like, stunned because he didn't know what to say. Like, if you know, then what do you have to say? So he did anything that a normal Asian would do. He looked for the
Mm.
black guy in the congregation and said, "Oh, he speak to him." So he called some guy from Africa. Said, "Look, speak to this guy. I need to speak to him." And the guy was like, "Take shahada, take shahada, take shahada, take shahada, take shahada, take shahada." I'm like, "Don't worry, all your questions will be solved. Take shahada, all your queries, just take shahada." And eventually I thought, you know what? Okay, let me just do this. And whatever problems I have, I'll resolve it later on.
Mm.
And alhamdulillah, I took the step. They put me in the masjid, took the shahada. Everyone gave me a hug and said, "MashaAllah, you're Muslim now." They put me in the front row to pray. No will do anything. Just stand in the front row and just copy us. I prayed with them. Went back home. Said to my mum, "I'm Muslim now." And she goes, "Yeah, okay." So okay. So I went upstairs, started reading.
Really?
Yeah, my mum, she didn't take it seriously at the time. And then that was it. That was the beginning of my journey.
Mm.
So my point is, even though I knew Islam was true, even though I was given da'wah to Islam, there still was that event,
Yeah.
that turning point, which led to the Shahada. And I do believe that everyone still, they have to have that turning point. And maybe for me, or as much as I think I am logical and rational and whatnot, maybe that was that emotional push that I needed, that punch in the chest to make me to that brings about action. So, you know,
Mhm.
I don't know. It's an odd one to say because, like I said, in my mind, I was convinced about Islam, but the step wasn't made until that event.
Mm. You know that's quite interesting because sometimes what it takes is I've forgotten the name of this term, right? But basically, you're stuck in between a place of progress and you know you're stuck basically in a position where you need to go down a notch before you go up. So it's
Yeah,
like somebody they're working in a job, they're earning very mediocre money, right? And what happens is they need to go through some pain, so they get laid off. But then when they get laid off, they learn a new skill and then they become a millionaire. So it's like sometimes you need to go down a notch, you need a slap in the face, and then you go springing back up. But that moment that you haven't got the slap, you're actually in a comfortable complacency. Comfortable complacency. You're stuck in that position and you're not going down. Okay, now the problem is that journey is kind of painful when someone slaps you down. Like, what are you doing eating pork? You're here talking about Islam and you're doing all this stuff, right? And I think for a lot of people, their reaction to things like that is mind your own business or just trying to be defensive or this kind of thing. Do you think deep down something was already nagging at you and that was just the straw that broke the camel's back? Or do you think it was just like a paradigm shift in that moment that why am I not practicing what I'm doing? What I'm
I mean,
actually.
I knew. Thing is, I knew. I'll be honest. There was a bit of healer going on. There's a bit of ruse going on in my head because I knew that as long as I'm not Muslim, my book wasn't open. So there was that. There was still that much known.
Allah Akbar.
And so I guess there was a bit of delay in that regards. That okay, I mean, there's that satanic deception that
Yeah.
if you want to become Muslim,
Yeah.
fix yourself first, and then when you become Muslim, you're good.
Yeah. That old
Whereas
chestnut.
reality is, you need to take the step
Yeah.
and recognize that it's an ongoing journey anyway. There's no. You're not going to become Abu Bakr or an angel, and then you take the shahada. Take the shahada or become Muslim, and then those
Yeah.
steps will come.
That's
But
right.
what you mentioned there, I think I want to draw a generic benefit for everyone, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. This is one of the benefits of sins. If you ask yourself, some of the people sometimes, especially from a Christian perspective, who see sins very differently to Muslims. From a Muslim perspective, sins are actually beneficial because sins gives you an opportunity to make tawbah. It opens doors that may actually have been closed to you before. So, let me give you an example. Maybe a person needs to experience the slap of tragedy to recognize the blessing of, or the ni'mah of, the blessing of al-Islam. So, for example, maybe you might find a person who has slipped up in a particular avenue, and because of that, it cost him dearly. He lost his business, he lost his job, he lost his wife, lost his kids. Something must have happened,
Yeah,
but that pain itself led him to become better than he was beforehand.
that's right.
And so it's not just about issue of Islam. It could even could do with issue of just actions on its own. And I guess it's an issue of explorative behavior. Same thing with regards to, like, sometimes I bring analogies of trading. I know it's probably a bad thing to combine capitalism with deen, but when people trade, I often tell people that in order to be a good trader, you have to lose a lot of money, because if you don't lose money, you can never really taste the reality of the trade. Meaning, what some people do is they do like what's called a trial trade, where they trading in their head, but there's not actual real money on the table. So they say, okay, at this point I'm acting like I'm buying, at this point I'm acting like I'm selling, so I'm practicing trading, but that's all fake. It's not real. You need to actually feel the pain of losing money to actually learn something.
SubhanAllah.
Same thing with children. That's why I have the same approach with my kids. When my kids fall down, feel pain, lose things, like, for example, lose a game. For example, it's happened with my son. He did something. I got upset with him. I plugged out the PlayStation, and because of that, he lost his game, and he's very upset. But because of that, though, he learned the lesson of the importance of backing up his data. A lesson that he would not have learned otherwise.
That's very important. It's very interesting. It reminds me of we had a talk in this place called Western Supermare. I'm sure you've never heard of it, right? No. It's out in the middle of nowhere, somewhere near Wales, right? So it's me and Hamza Sotzis. We went there. There's a whole bunch of people in this small community center. It's the sort of place where Harlesden High Street would look like Oxford Street, because it's so, like, such a little town, and very few population and this kind of thing. So anyway, we went in there, gave a talk, about Islam and this kind of thing. And there's this white guy who, for lack of a better term, looked like a chav, right?
Yeah.
He just looked like a real chav, and just sitting there, and he's wearing shorts, and he just looked like you would think, why is he sitting an Islamic talk? And Hamza gave this very intellectual talk and all this stuff. And he wasn't an intellectual. He was really just like a very basic person. And Hamza stopped speaking. He put up his hand, and you would think, okay, he's going to try and say, don't you Muslims have 4 wives? And, just something to put you off. But instead of that, he just simply said, does Allah forgive everything? That's all he said.
Yeah.
In his mind, all he was interested in this entire talk, I know he didn't understand anything. He was sitting there with patience, listening to everything. His main thing is, I want to know if I can be forgiven. And what comes to my mind is, and I've dealt with another case recently where somebody admitted, like, they had a really messed up life and they want to become Muslim. He must have done something really bad.
Yeah.
There must be something eating his soul that he's like, oh my God. It could have been, and this does actually happen, that, you're a gangster, you're selling drugs, you're doing this, you're doing that. And then it's the first time you sell drugs and somebody has an overdose. That point, you're like, that's it. You've come out your complacency, your comfortable complacency. You're like, okay, you go down a notch, and then you just want to leave that lifestyle completely. So I agree totally with what you're saying, because one of the things that Shaitan wants humanity to do is to lose hope in Allah. But Allah is saying, look, everything is possible. And it's very interesting, Muawiyah, what you're saying, because Nuh alayhi salam, when he goes to his nation, he doesn't just say worship Allah alone. He reminds them of Allah's forgiveness, because these were wicked people, right?
Yeah.
I think that's very important. And I'll tell you something which I found very interesting. I'm sure you've been to Speaker's Corner, and you must have seen some of the missionaries down there, right? There's one missionary down there. He's always wearing these glasses. He's got a beard. He dresses up like he's Sherlock or something, right? Like really tweed and very nice, clothing, old school English style, right? This guy was studying at Oxford University, and as a student, he was going through all that whatever stuff, and he was an atheist,
Yeah.
and he was a militant atheist. There's no God, religion's rubbish. I don't believe in any of this. And this guy basically said he had a pornographic addiction. He was addicted to watching porn, and he was just watching porn and just doing all this stuff. And he said he felt so bad that he just wanted forgiveness, and that's why he became Christian. And I just thought, what the hell is this? Like, become Muslim or this or that. And Muawiyah, his was funny, yeah. No logic was working on him. I started using, the standard stuff. Do you know that the Bible's, it's not the word of God, and it hasn't been preserved, and he was just like, yeah, I know the Bible, yeah, I know it's not preserved. And you throw anything at him, yeah, okay, yeah. Prove to me Jesus is God from the Bible. Yeah, I know you can't read it. He couldn't. He was the worst missionary I've ever seen. All he was saying was, I feel basically it's in essence, Christianity helped me get rid of my sin. That's it.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, I totally resonate with.
Yeah. So there is definitely, I think everyone, there's that hit that everyone needs, and that's one of the reasons why. I mean, this hit is not just, like I said, it's not. I don't think it's a religious thing. I think it's a human thing. Generally, change sometimes requires pain, and that's when it comes to business, when it comes to anything. For example, maybe in a dead end job, but the life is a constant flat line. It's not up, it's not down. So you can continue on that norm. You're never really you don't really think of doing anything more than what you are, because you're getting what you're getting. The moment there's a risk of you losing your job or something went wrong, now you start thinking about it, whereas you never had it before. So yeah, that does exist. And that definitely does exist. So back to the issue of Islam. So then after that was my second year, the beginning of there was a summer holiday of college. So first year college done. This happened in second in the summer holiday, and in my second year, I was Muslim, and then that was when I went full on learning everything I could about Islam, and eventually I applied to Medina University, and then eventually I got accepted to study there in Saudi Arabia, and then I came back to do that. So that was essentially my journey. But important point to highlight for any non-Muslim listening is that even though I took Shahada and I was a practicing Muslim, there is still a journey. And when I say a journey, I don't mean a journey of learning, I mean a journey of conviction. So, for example, clearly there was when I first became Muslim and I was to engage with other people, my conviction in Islam only grew with time and with knowledge. It wasn't something that I became Muslim and then immediately I knew everything and I was full 100%. Yeah, I was 100% enough to become Muslim, enough to know that what I was upon was nonsense. But still, once I learned more and more about Islam, a lot of the I would say it got to best way to describe it is that when I first became Muslim, doubts or arguments against Islam were largely things I would have to research and look into. Maybe there's something to this.
Yeah.
Whereas after addressing these things year in, year out, argument after argument, especially in Medina, where part of the curriculum is to always study the counter narratives. This is the truth. What is said opposite to the truth. That's part of the whole curriculum. You almost become jaded, almost like, you must get used to seeing how things don't add up. So when people bring in things about evolution or things about science, that kind of stuff, you kind of look at it, kind of think, your conviction in Islam is so much greater that you have to bring something even more greater than that, which is the bar gets so much. That's best to describe. The bar gets so high that it's just hard to even surpass that. But that comes with knowledge. It doesn't come immediately. There's always that initial doubt. And the best way I've always described it to people is that before I became Muslim, I always saw Islam as being like a door that I have no idea what's behind that door. because that's the reality of being a Muslim. It's a life. It's not just, it's not just, I believe in the end of it. It's a shift of how you even live your life. How would that life look like? What would that life be? I have no idea. That uncertainty can be frightening for many people. Once you open that door and go behind that door, you realize that fear was highly exaggerated. That's what Shaitan does to you. Shaitan exaggerates your fears in Islam, and it's not really there. I mean, people say to me, "Oh, what about this and what about that? And what about this and what about that?" If you break it down, a lot of these arguments are just some Shaitan.
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I remember one Christian guy, I was debating with him outside the shopping center. He goes to me, "Oh, you say Muslim women have to cover their head. Why should they cover their head?" The usual stuff. And I think to myself, why am I even asking these questions all the time when it doesn't matter? So I said to him, "Hold on, let me ask you a question. You believe in God, right?" He says, "Yeah." If you knew that God ordered this, are you going to argue with it? He goes, "No." I said, "Why? Therefore, that's the wrong question. You're asking the wrong question. The question you should be asking is, did God order the hijab? Not why should he order hijab? Because the why is irrelevant, really. The why is just an excuse to reject. The question should always be, did God actually say this? Because if he did, we hear and we obey. And if he didn't, then we reject it.
I think that brings me to something which I want to share. That point is so profound, and I know you need to go. So
No,
maybe
that's cool.
Yeah, okay. So basically, I was in East London, and in East London in Stratford, there's a dawah table. So when you come out of Stratford Station, there's
No, brothers,
these brothers. They've been giving dawah there for a few years, but even before then, people were giving that spot has been a dawah spot for a long time, right?
Yeah.
So what happened is one Ramadan, I was out there, and I came across this lady. She just looked like a typical East London, typical English woman, right? Same Cockney accent, everything, right? Not really Cockney accent, but you get my point. Standard English girl. So she came to the stall and started talking about Islam and this kind of thing. I was interested because she seemed to know a lot. She was listening to Muslims online, and she was just all this stuff. And then it was kind of weird because she just knew a bit too much. It turned out she's been researching Islam for 13 years.
Wow.
30 years, right? She is a social worker that works with the Muslim community in East London, right? There's a lot of Muslims there. She has been reading Hadith, reading Quran, listening to all these different, like she named me Islamic speakers, right? I'm listening to this person or whatever. I'm just thinking, what is this? Like, she believes in all of this. So anyway, talking to her. The next week, I told her, look, I'm going to come back to the stall on this day. Let's do this, right? Let's have a meeting. So the second or the third time that we met, I thought, do you know what? I need to just go for the jugular. Just tell her, look, why aren't you accepting Islam? Like, what's the problem?
Yeah.
Because she even knew fiqh. Would you believe it? She knew about fiqh. Like,
I believe 100%. Yeah.
So what happened is, so she came, and then this time I said to her, look, you need to accept Islam, basically, right? Why aren't you Muslim? And she just went, she's very confident. She just went shy, had a bit of a smile, and she didn't even answer. So I said, okay. I said, do you believe in Allah? Do you believe in God? She said, yeah, I believe in God. I said, do you believe the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the messenger of God? She thought about it and she said, yeah. So I was like, just become Muslim. What's the problem? And then she goes, but you see, I'm a feminist, right? There's a lot of things that just don't add up with my feminism in Islam. I said, okay. She knows, I know age of Aisha radiallahu anha, or 4 wives, or whatever it is, there's half inheritance, whatever it is. I didn't bother going into any of the standard way of doing it. All I simply said to her is, okay, I've been Muslim for over 30 years. I don't understand some of these things. What I do know is God knows everything. I don't know anything. And this is from God. If it's from God, then God is right. I just don't understand it. That's all that matters. So I said to her, look, that's what you need to do. You need to stop trying to get these questions answered and think, if this is from God, then it's true. It doesn't matter whether you feel comfortable with it or not. It doesn't matter whether you're happy with it or not. It doesn't matter whether it makes sense to you or not. What the only thing that needs to make sense is it from God? And is this book true? That's it, right? So at that point, alhamdulillah, the 13 years of researching Islam came to an end. She took her shahada, right?
MashaAllah,
But I
MashaAllah.
didn't give her any information. There's the thing, Muawi. I gave her no information. All I did is the cognitive architecture, which was all muddled up. I just rearranged it to make her understand the same point that you were making earlier, which is, if it's true, if it's like you said to that Christian guy, if hijab is from God, then what's the problem? Rather than talking about putting on hijab means that the pheromones are not released and, you know, all that stuff that we hear, it's all out there. So
The
we,
pheromones.
yeah, people come up with, you know, pheromones are released and men get attracted and it releases testosterone and in the men and they flirt and all this, whatever. Who cares? The fact is, Sami'na wa ata'na. Allah said, so we obey, right? What's beautiful about this, many non-Muslims are ready to accept Islam if somebody is willing to be brave enough to tell them, listen, stop asking these questions. Our culture teaches us, do you know what? Question bloody everything. Every single thing under the sun needs to be questioned. But you know what? We sometimes need to invert it and say, nobody questions everything. Like, you don't walk into a university room and then the professor says to you, today we're going to go over Eric Hoffer's book, The Believer. He wrote the book in the 1950s based upon how do you know he wrote it in the 1950s? How do you know Eric Hoffer is a real person? How do you know he's not a CIA spy? That you're not going to do a skepticism ad infinitum. You're going to go to the basic thing, which is this true? Is this guy right? Same thing with Islam. And do you not feel that a lot of the dawah that's happening online and even these very popular videos, it's the counter narrative to going back to the basics of whether Islam's true?
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, there's definitely a place for addressing doubts and addressing questions that people have. But like I said, it does come down to the fundamental reality of, the best way to look at it is like this. I think you can almost summarize it in this one point. Islam means submit to Allah's will. So to submit to Allah in monotheism and submit to His will in obedience, and the personification, the pinnacle of that submission, is when we place our heads on the ground in prostration to Allah, which is a physical manifestation of pure humbleness. One needs to humble themselves to see the truth. So I believe, if you go back to my story and maybe the other stories, people, and even maybe the story with that woman, we had the knowledge, but we still had arrogance. We needed that humbling event to recognize you're not that great. You're not that special. Your views that you have are just views. They're not that special. If you acknowledge that Allah is speaking to you and that He alone is giving you this information, humble yourself to the knowledge. If you do that, then Islam comes. And I think that happened to me. I was given doubt to Islam. I knew the truth was true, but I still felt that I had something special. It took Zishan to say to you, you're an idiot. Humble yourself. You're going around Islam like you're some super smart guy, but you can't even abstain from pork. You're a chief.
No, honestly, we sometimes need that. We need someone to just give us a slap back to reality. So, Muaawiyah, it's been fantastic speaking to you. I would love to bring you back on the stream to talk about actually crypto, not crypto, Bitcoin. I know. And in fact, me and you talk on Telegram, like you obviously are focusing on something which I believe a lot of Muslims are caught unawares. And even now, recently, I was talking to a Muslim who was, successfully from an Islamic perspective, he has knowledge, but not like a huge amount of knowledge, but knowledge. And when it comes to cryptocurrency, his own business, mashallah, he's done really well. When it comes to the world of Bitcoin, like completely like, oh no, this guy said it's haram and we can't do this and this, like it's all this misconception. So I would love to do a stream on this.
Yeah,
um
anytime, inshallah.
yeah, because for me this is, we're always late. We are always, as an ummah, we are
No,
always.
no, 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 no. Don't think that. Don't
Yeah.
think that. We'll discuss it next time. But this is as a soundbite. If you can imagine that every single person, or not every single person, but most people that we know of today, from our friends, from our relatives, from our neighbors, from our colleagues, or not, they've only ever known in their lives the current fiat system with banks. They've never known another system other than that. To change that shift in mindset is so drastic that it makes sense why people struggle. And I've made this parallel to people, and this ties this into this. Money is a belief system. Money is a belief system. It requires iman. It requires belief. You accept pounds as payment or dollars as payment or gold as payment, not because the thing itself is worth anything, but purely because of your belief that it holds something. So to shift your mindset to something else, you would find, if you actually analyze it, because you're in all of dawah, you would actually find that the exact same processes that goes in people's head when it comes to accepting Islam is actually the same processes when it comes to contemplating Bitcoin. Now, many people have spoken to them about this. They don't like the idea. Why are you bringing Bitcoin and religion together? I'm not trying to conflate Bitcoin and religion. I'm trying to say that as a human being, changing beliefs is irregardless of whether it's Islam or Bitcoin or Christianity or Zionism or feminism or atheism. They are all belief systems. And human beings behave exactly the same way when it comes to adoption and acceptance of something counter-narrative. So just like a Christian who is a Christian and it comes to atheism, and if he that the shift he has to make to go to atheism is pretty much the same shift that goes to any ism, because it's a belief shift. So likewise, when it comes to Muslims being slow, quote unquote, the guys that adopting Bitcoin, it's the same with a non-Muslim, because it's the same thing to do with belief. The same stupid excuses people have about Islam, they make stupid excuses about Bitcoin. It's exactly the same, brother. If you just actually change the names, you find the exact same narrative. And I've actually mentioned to people, I was actually thinking maybe I should write a short story or short article about it, drawing parallels between the da'wah in Medina and Mecca and what we see today when it comes to Bitcoin. Again, I'm not trying to say that Bitcoin is religious or is some kind of divine thing. I'm just trying to say, if you look at the how does a culture shift its belief systems, the same characters play, the same story plays out. It's the same thing. So we could talk about it another time, inshallah. But it's pretty much the same kind of narrative. It's just rather than talking about religion and about God and about absolutes, you can say about God. It's just different. Just a different narrative.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair, Ustad Muawiyah. What I want to do is, there's some people in the audience like Nihilism 12 who's been trying to refute us, and others. Look, if you're an atheist, next time, if Ustad Muawiyah is good with it, we'll just add you to the stream. We'll talk to you, right? We have no worries talking to our, brothers and sisters in humanity. The fact is that we want to convey this message. We want to show that Islam is the truth. So if you believe Islam is not true, because you're from the children of Adam, whether you accept it or not, we're from the children of Adam. We are going to explain to you this, right? Because we believe it to be true. And you can try and refute us in the comments, but we're not going to get far. I did question whether you wanted to join the stream, the guy who's trying to refute us, but he didn't. So no worries. Next time, inshallah, we'll have Ustad Muawiyah. Maybe we'll get people to join the stream who disagree.
But just one point on that, about that guy who was on the stream. And I think this, again, there's a little point for people to think about when it comes to the issue of discussion. This person is trying to refute us, this individual. The way he's behaving is indicative of a belief system. So even if he thinks he's an atheist and that he has no beliefs, the way they behave is very much just like a belief system. The way Richard Dawkins behaves and all these other guys behave, they believe like zealots. in any religion. They say
Yeah,
they're irreligious, but they are very religious. And the way that people would throw around, oh, but science, the same as people say, oh, but the Bible says, or the Bhagavad Gita says, it's the same stuff. It's all about belief systems. But as long as the person is open to listen, comprehend, and humble themselves, it's the key point. If you're not willing to humble yourself, then it's not going to happen. And that's one thing, alhamdulillah, I have to say that I reckon I did help myself. I did in my journey ask Allah as a non-Muslim to guide me to what is true, to show me where I've gone wrong. If a person is not willing to ask that question to the Creator to show them to the truth, that's them saying to themselves, I don't care what the truth is. You have to care. You have to actually want to know what the truth is, and that would lead you to look, inshallah. So that's it, inshallah.
absolutely. Jazakallah khair. Ustad Muawiyah will have you next time, inshallah, talking about crypto. Until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.